You are listening to the sounds of the Right On Network.
Hello and welcome to On the Record Jams. This is episode 11 brought to you by the Right On Network. I'm AJ and along with me is Arthur. Hello, Arthur.
Hello, AJ. We're back. We're in middle of February. The year's going by really fast, but like I always say, we have two good ones today. So let's do it.
We're in the year 2025 and I just want to tell everyone that Arthur and I, we did like this bonus extra episode that's up there for our Patreon subscribers where we talk about Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl. I mean, this story has had legs. I've been hearing it, all different kind of people talking about this. It was an event. I know it's one of those things where it's like, hey, where were you when this happened? And we kind of talk about how even if you're under a rock or you're trying to avoid this, we're all getting dragged into this conversation. So, and when I say that, I mean that like in a positive, neutral type of way. But I want to thank those Patreon subscribers because of them. This particular podcast, On the Record Jams, is the reason why it exists, because of your support. And I want to start off by thanking Alan Wright. He's bold outlaw. Robin Hood enthusiast. Delvin Sims, he's the sound of the Right On Network. You just heard his music. Tim Price, the podcrasher himself. You can hear him at the Outcasters, Batman and the Outsiders podcast. Friend of the Right On Network, Cluck Trent. We have Mark Blair. You can hear him at Feathers and Foes of Birds of Prey podcast. Paul Hicks, he does Waiting for Doom, DCOCD, The Gary Show, and Dial F for Flanger. Paul, I got to talk to you. I'd like for you to come on straight out of Gallifrey. Laurel Phillips, she's Mountain Flower One. She she moderates Feathers and Foes and the Hunters podcast. We have over at the Fire and Water Podcast Network, the Irredeemable Shag. He does Once Upon a Geek, Justice League International Bwahaha podcast. Who's Who Revisited, Justice Society of America in the 1990s. And speaking of the Justice Society, it is the 85th anniversary of the first superhero team ever, 85 years ago. And a bunch of podcasters and bloggers, including some folks here at the Right On Network. We are celebrating with JS April. You'll hear their promo for that later. So, Irredeemable Shag, Fire and Water Podcast Network. Justin Steiner, he's a music enthusiast as well. He has a Substack, Shoot Fly Pie. He does things like early 2000s power pop. Rick from Jeff and Rick Present. Chris Pine 1. Bill Beer of the Bat Pod. And April 5K, you can hear her on the Manhattan Project, a Seinfeld and Friends podcast, as well as Bold Outlaw and April 5K on Straight Out of the Federation, a Blake 7 podcast here at the Right On Network. And Jordan Holt. Thank you, Jordan Holt, and all of you. You're wonderful people. Thank you for your Patreon support because, again, this particular podcast exists because of your Patreon support. We truly appreciate it. They went to patreon.com/RightOnNetwork. And guys, listen to that conversation Arthur and I had about Kendrick Lamar at the 59th Super Bowl, or was it the 6th? No, it's 59th Super Bowl.
59th, yes.
Wow.
Can you imagine what it's going to be for the 60th? How crazy they're going to go for that?
Wow. Yeah, it's going to be over the top. It's a Super Bowl, man. So, all right. Arthur and I, we have two records that we want to discuss with you. Arthur, we're going to have you submit what you want on the record this time.
Okay, let's, I don't know if this is getting weird, but it is getting more recent. So we're going to go to 2020. We're going to go to the album Pray for Paris. And that means gun noises, everybody. Boom, 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 boom. Westside Gunn. And the song I'm going to pick from that is the Super Friends song. And not the normal Griselda Super Friends where we get Benny and Conway on a Westside Gunn song. I'm talking about $500 ounces. Whereas Westside Gunn is Freddie Gibbs and Roc Marciano. This song is all up in my playlist, so I hear it all the time. There's a lot to like about it. for this aesthetic of rap music. I don't know what you want to call this, retro rap, New York retro rap. I don't know what the label, what is there a label for this type of rap music?
I would like to call it It's Okay, They're There. And the reason why I say that is because of this. You know, like every 3 years, music might change or culture might change. So you have to be very careful with not getting your old man on, whereas like, hey, back in my day, or this isn't as good as the stuff I liked in my formative years. So for a while, I had to kind of check myself when I was like, hey, wait a minute, there's nothing out there that I like, which isn't true because in the underground, there's always folks doing this kind of stuff. But, you know, you and I talked about Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl. And the thing about that is the thing going back and forth with him and Drake. And for a while, you had to be kind of careful. If you weren't a big fan of Drake, you had to keep it to yourself so you wouldn't be shamed into being a hater. And the Kendrick Lamar is kind of like, no, it's okay, right? Like, no, like if you thought that this was corny, it's okay, you know. And then you could be on the other side of it and go like, I totally don't agree with that. So, hey. I grew up in high school, raking the leaves to Wu-Tang Clan albums and all their affiliates and all the side projects. But, you know, that's not going to last forever. It was almost amazing that it lasted as long as it did. So we get into the 2000s and, you know, there's all kind of other waves and other directions. And then Westside Gunn out of Buffalo, the Griselda movement with Benny the Butcher and Conway, Westside Gunn's half brother, they go like, hey, you know what? We're going to do this. This is like 2016 or whatever. We're going to give you that feeling that you had in the late 90s East Coast, and we're going to make it where it's okay. Like, yeah, like remember when you had to kind of listen to this on the side or whatever, you're an old head? No. We're going to bring that feeling back. Like, nah, it's okay. We can keep doing this. And Arthur and I, guys, we've had this conversation since the early 2000s where we knew where the culture was going. And I saw it with MF Doom, Metal Fingers Doom, where it was like, hey, don't worry about trying to get the masses. If you get the masses, that's wonderful. Don't worry about getting the masses. If you get a core audience, and we were even saying this, like, don't even worry about selling 10 million albums. If you get so much of a cult following and you make some type of box set, those box sets sometimes $50, $60, you just need to sell 10,000 of them. So a lot of times when you appeal to the masses, who knows how long that will last. That could be fleeting. But if you have this cult following, they'll stay with you no matter what the wave, trend, or vibe is. They're just going to stay with you. So MF Doom and others, they banked on that. Whereas like, I'm just going to ride this wave. This would be my career. And then that's what Westside Gunn and the Griselda movement did, as well as Roc Marciano, who was with Flipmo Squad in the late 90s, early 2000s. He picked the lane and went, I'm just going to keep doing this. So one thing that we're going to have on episode 11 of On the Record Jams, we're going to talk about these folks where it's like, hey, we do this thing. Those folks who like it, we're just going to keep doing this thing. So it's not going to be where like, hey, you know, one moment we're doing I Want to Hold Your Hand. Boom, we're doing Yellow Submarine now. And trust me, guys, I love that stuff. I love when bands, they go this way, that direction, this direction, that direction. And then when there are bands where, hey, you know what? We kind of have this one chamber and we're just going to keep working within that chamber. There'll be tweaks. We'll augment it. We'll add on to it. But we're going to kind of just do this one lane. So we know, man, sometimes you might have, you know, money's tight or your time is tight. So it's not going to be like, I wonder what this album's going to sound like. You'll know. So it's going to be a sure bet. So like usually, Arthur, when I go to restaurants, I don't usually venture out. I usually get kind of like the same kind of things I always do, because if I'm going to venture out and this is a $56 meal and I don't like it, I'm going to be angry. So when I'm at the ice cream shop, I don't need a sample. I'm 46. What? A sample of ice cream? Why would I do that? I'm at some restaurant or something. You want to sample this drink? Nah, I pretty much know what I kind of like at this point. I'm 46. I'm not going to venture out at this point. Or if I do, I would do that at my own time. Not when this place is busy. Why would I do that? What's the deal? So I don't know what we can call this kind of music, but I did want to put that out there where the two records Arthur and I are going to present is by artists where they have a mode, they have a chamber, they have a certain vibe, and over time, 10 years plus, 20 years plus, they just do that, and it's a brand you can trust.
Right. And I think the great thing about the earlier part of this movement, and I mean, you could go back, like you said, you could take it all the way at least back to MF Doom. And he was doing what he was doing. He had a hell of a run, and he did a lot of good stuff to create that kind of it's all right to do this if you want to do this type universe. I also account for, the producer of this 500 Ounces song, Alchemist. I remember when Alchemist made that album with Mobb Deep's Prodigy, Return of the Mac. That's like 2006, 2007. And I remember getting that album and thinking, wait a minute, I didn't know you could still do this. I didn't know you could still rap like this. I didn't know you could just stay in a lane. And then that happened. And then you go to like 2010 or so. This is when you get Roc Marciano's Marsburg, which was super retro, super 1995 East Coast album cut, but that's the whole album. And there's no, I got to do this song with Genuine. There's no, hey, I'm over here trying to get on a song with Miley Cyrus. No, it's just aesthetic. It's vibe. It's a mood. It's, I'm coming on here and I got jokes. I got threats. I got a list of obscure samples that you're not going to just hear it and know what it is, even if you have a soul background. Like, you're going to have to go really look. And it got to the point where, like, now these guys don't even list their samples. So it's a whole thing now, like trying to find the records that they use. It's almost part of their mystique now. And so it's like you get that. And then also in the background, you have Freddie Gibbs kind of trying to do it the Atlanta street rap type thing, even though he's from Gary, Indiana. And then he kind of gets scooped up by Madlib, and they do the collaboration albums. And then he did a collaboration album with Alchemist. And then he also got with another rapper that does this lane thing. Do you know about Currency from New Orleans?
I've only seen the name. That's Currency with the money sign?
Yes.
In the name? Yes, keep going.
Ultra prolific. I mean, if I said this guy's got 50 albums, I might be selling it short. Like, he put out a lot of product, and he's also a part of this group too. Now,
Arthur, I'm so sorry. I'm going to rudely interrupt you. When I was talking to that young person, and when I say young person, they maybe 21, 22, and I said, like, the Griselda guys, and she was like, oh, that's like Currency and Joey Badass, right? So it's like in that realm again, where like, oh, they're young rappers today, but they're doing that retro, giving you that old feel again. Okay, I'm sorry, keep going.
Right. And now when you think about it, like, these guys are viewed as young because they're not as visible, but and these guys now, they also kind of have that Wu-Tangish story. Like, they tried something, it didn't work. They had to kind of go curl up in a corner and figure out what their next shot was going to be. So that's where kind of all these guys come together. So Currency, Freddie Gibbs, Roc Marciano,
even MF Doom.
Group.
MF Doom had to do that.
Yeah.
Let me reinvent myself.
yeah, like I'm going to do this thing. And you know what? If I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail doing the thing that I think I'm the best at. And so when those guys all get together, I view it like a big old revenge of the nerds. Like, we're going to do this and we're going to blow it out. And to me, this song is a big representation of that, because you got Gibbs, Marciano, and Westside Gunn all together. And it's like nobody talked to anybody. They just went in. It's 3 different verses. And they just went, they all heard the beat and said, okay, I'm going to go off to this.
It's interesting that you said the Revenge of the Nerds thing, because this is like street music, but the people listening to this are rap nerds.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's funny about it. So, yeah, man. Another thing that's going on here, Alchemist, he's the producer. Another thing going on with this movement you talk about with the Return of the Mac with Prodigy from Mobb Deep, out of Queensbridge, Prodigy originally from Long Island, is that these producers were like in the late 90s when they were making all this stuff, like the RZA, he's doing all these things. And it's like, hey, how'd you do that? Can you recreate that? No, for 2 reasons. I don't want to, because, you know, by the time you hear it, RZA and those other producers, they're already on some other stuff. And then 2, it's like, man, the magic happened. You know, I turn on the stove top and did the clicking thing. Well, maybe the technology got better with stovetops where I can't recreate that sound anymore. So I don't know how I did what I just did. I just know how to do it. I'm Michael Jordan. I know how to play basketball at an elite level. I don't know how to coach it to you. But then years go by and you have people like Alchemist and others where I get what that is. Like I can explain this now. Or I'm Alchemist and I can go to Prodigy and I can help you recreate this sound that you used to do, or I can kind of explain to you why you're great. For you, you just kind of do it, but I can put you in these setups and all these situations where I think this is what people want from you. So we're in that era now, and I think that's why this is a very special time as well, because these people have, and I mean this in a good way, like they've kind of figured it out. And it's like, give the people what they want. Just give the people what they want. Like, this is something else I want to talk about where it's like, it's fan service. And people usually say that with a negative connotation. And it's like, you know what? I work a full-time job. Fan service me.
Please.
Oh, they're just pandering to the audience. Yes. What, yeah, I'm watching. I want to watch the show. Yes. Pander to me. Fan service me. Well, what are we not doing? Yeah. Why am I watching the show? I keep returning to it. What, you want to insult me every time I watch it? Yes. Pander to me. Fan service me. And that's what I like about what we're about to talk about and this whole movement and this thing where it's like, we know you like this thing. You can't go to the radio for it. So we're going to give it to you here.
Right. And also, too, I look at it like, even as a listener, and I always put all this responsibility on the listener, right? But I think with great power comes great responsibility. We can open up an app and there's millions of songs in there. You just got to know what to search for. And it's like, okay, like I view my viewing, I view my intake, I view my content usage as like a big quilt. And you know, like those old country people quilts that like somebody handmade and they put patches on it. And yeah, this type of music is a patch on my quilt. But this is the only thing I listen to all day long, every single day. I can get in the zone and listen to it. I'll get in the gym and be like, okay, I can do 45 minutes of this. But like I'll have other things and I have other lanes and I have other patches on my quilt that I go into. And I try to appreciate and enjoy them all. Obviously, depending on when you catch me, I might be in a certain zone one way or another. But yeah, I think that fan service group is, these guys failed before. So they don't have any concept of, hey, I can just do whatever I want and force the audience to come to me. They're like, no, the audience didn't come to me the first time. I need to go to the audience. I need to figure out what it is that you're hearing that you don't like, and then I'm going to try to zig what other people are zagging. So music got kind of glossy. There was a lot of singing going on. We joke about it all the time. I call it yodeling when some people do it. But there was a lot of yodeling going on. And I think these good rappers, these dudes that were like our age and a few years younger, said, hey, man, I think people are getting tired of this. Why don't we roll up and get some of these producers? Let's get Ski Beats. Let's get anybody from that era that's still making beats and try to get them to make us some beats. And Alchemist was just kind of, I don't know what Alchemist was doing, but people started rolling up on Alchemist, and all of a sudden now it's like getting Alchemist is a big deal again, whereas it seemed like before we were wondering, where are these people finding Alchemist? How is he so easy to get to where these basically unknown rappers are getting 5 Alchemist songs on their albums? And then they make another album 3 months later and they got 3 more Alchemist songs. How is this happening? But it seems really clear that these guys planned this out. They started getting exactly what you described. They had the following and then fan service. People are listening to a lot of music. People want to hear a lot of music. We know what you do. Just go do more of it. The technology is telling us now that, especially in this space, depending on the type of work you're doing, rap-wise, like you can get some rap music out. If you get in the studio and you have the producers and you lock it in, you figure out your topics, you figure out who you're going to get there with you, because everybody's trying to create a lot of product as a part of this whole fan service thing. And like you're saying, if you're trying to sell 10,000 or something, okay, great. You sell 10,000 of that. You look up a couple months later, you're not moving that same product anymore. You need to create another product. And like you say, because you kind of created that wave for yourself, people know what they're going to get from you. So create another album. Maybe get different guests that still kind of fit in that same lane. Maybe go a little bit different, but don't jump off a bridge. Don't jump the shark, and just kind of keep doing it. And what do you know? You look at like a guy like Westside Gunn. What does he do? He's got the gun noises. He's got the basketball references. He's got the wrestler references. He's got the obscure 80s and 90s references. Dude, how many albums can you make if you just make a list of like 200 wrestlers?
And Westside Gunn, I think he's a good executive producer because, we're doing a lot of preamble before we actually get to this record, and that's great because we want to put this in context. But out of the Griselda guys, Westside Gunn, Benny the Butcher, and Conway the Machine, they're better rappers, like technically.
Oh, yeah.
However, I always prefer the Westside Gunn records because his beats are weird and quirky and just jamming. So, and Westside Gunn is really like, hey, man, you guys really like that classic Supreme Clientele and Fish Scale and More Fish. What if I gave that to you over and over again? And that's what I'm loving. I don't ask for much. I'm a simple man. I just want, dynamite. That's it. Just gunpowder. That's it. Just simple stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's simple until you know that these dudes have to have a certain amount of skill to keep producing this volume of quote unquote the same type of thing, right? Because there's a lot of wordplay happening here. And you got that list of 200 wrestlers down there in the studio. And you're like, man, I haven't said anything about Ted DiBiase yet, so let me do a Ted DiBiase thing. Okay, I already talked about Roman Reigns now. Okay, I got to bring up one of them real, like, them 90s wrestlers. Okay, I got to bring up Goldberg, or I got to bring up something. And it's, but they're doing it.
And they and he understood, like, okay, in the 90s, they had these quirks where with Raekwon only built for Cuban links, it was like mafioso movies. And then they had these little quirks with superheroes and all that. So what if my quirk was wrestlers?
Right. And wrestling, contrary to popular belief, 25 years ago, it was, 6 to 7 million people watching it on every Monday. But now we're at the point where you're talking about there's wrestling on almost every day from somebody. Mm-hmm. And it's almost getting to the point where it's like a professional sport because it's on multiple apps and networks, and there's constantly a show, and there's always somebody somewhere pretending that they're fighting. And I'm not saying that derogatorily either, because wrestling is a great time. If you could just, at least I know it's a work, Sometimes I look out in the world and I see people taking a lot of stuff seriously, and I'm like, I don't think these people are serious. At least with pro wrestling, I get it. Everybody's in on the joke. We're working here. We're pretending that we're having a fight. We're pretending that we have some reason to be having a fight. And we're doing it, and there's a lot of money flying around to watch people do it. I mean, I was telling a couple of my buddies, and I was telling my wife as well, it's like WrestleMania is an April thing, right? And we're now to the point where WrestleMania, it used to be 3 hours. Well, now it's 3 or 4 hours on 2 nights. So it's Saturday night and Sunday night. And they bring people into the city like a big convention. And I mean, each night you're talking 70 something thousand people in a stadium watching this stuff. Oh, yeah. So for a guy like Westside Gunn, even back, 7 or 8 years ago when he started making a lot of albums, for him to have enough sense to kind of see that was a place to be. And he's just doing it. And, he shows up at the shows, and you look, and he's kind of distinctive. It's him. And you're like, oh, yeah, there he is. He's at another show in the front row. How is he doing this? And then he's bringing it up on the song. And, yeah, fourth row. And now he's working on his own thing. But, yeah, it's a fun approach. And, again, everybody can't do that, right? We've talked about Kendrick Lamar, and he's got resources. Drake has resources. They can take chances. They could do different stuff. And their approach is to just try to superstar rapper you to death. Yes, Kendrick Lamar is a superstar rapper, and it just didn't start last year, folks. But it's different. It's a different type of thing. And even between those two, their approach is different. And then when you throw in O.J. Cole, he's got a third approach. So there's a lot of different ways to skin this rap cat, man. And it's just these 3 guys on this $500 ounces record, man, their approach is really easy to understand. And either you like it. It's kind of like either you like it or you don't. But if you like it, man, it's a lot of good stuff to deal with here.
So let's get into this. 2020, Pray for Paris, Westside Gunn. This is our first Westside Gunn entry on this podcast. I don't think it would be the last. This wouldn't be my first. Talk about this, Arthur. April 17th, 2020. This is in the height of the pandemic.
Well, this was the early part of the pandemic. I call it the Tiger King part, where everybody was kind of having fun and baking weird bread. And they're like, I'm kind of stuck at the house, so I'm just kind of, I don't know what I'm going to do. Do I still have a job? All right, woo. People still have a job, people with kids, people that teach. You're like, okay, how am I going to teach from the house? And people just kind of like, well, this is the reality. Let's try to figure this out. And people that made music are like, yeah, dude, I'm just going to keep making this music. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to make it. I'm going to listen to it. And so that came out during this time. And I remember just seeing, I don't usually do the internet-y thing where you look at the track list and decide whether you think the album's going to be good or not based on the guest. I just kind of hit play and see what's going on. And they led into this with a whole big Ted DiBiase $1 Million Man wrestling thing. So they had a big skit, right? You talk about these skits and the weird stuff, right? So they have this weird skit of they leaning into this $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. He's making his own belt because he can't beat Hulk Hogan or whatever to become the real champion. So he's rich.
I remember that, Arthur, when we were kids, when Ted DiBiase went and got his belt made.
This fool went and made his own belt. And so, of course, they showed him going to make his own belt. And, of course, the wrestling rapping guy is going to have a skit with that, showing, like playing the part where he's going in there saying, give me more diamonds and what's up with this and what's up with that. And then that's the lead in to this song. And then now I joke about these guys not knowing what's happening, but at the end of Freddie Gibbs' verse, he's the jump off man. He's the deck here. So he gets the first verse and he gets a basketball reference in there. And he also gets a wrestling reference in there because he's Freddie Gibbs. We just talk about Ted DiBiase. So he says, I got skeletons in my closet right next to Balenciaga. Call me Fred DiBiase. My garage is $1 million. That's good rapping, dude. That's just good rapping. He tied it all in.
There's
good.
References.
Yes. And that's a lot of sneaky stuff in a short space. And it's just fun, metaphorical jokes, all up kind of in the main thing. Like, I'm the $1 million man. Like, my garage has $1 million worth of stuff in it. Like, that's a good tie-in. So it's like these guys are crazy like a fox, right? Because when we talk about these guys doing something that's quote unquote simple and easy to do, is it that simple? Would everybody know to do that? Would everybody have that in the middle of the verse? Like, I'm not sure, but these guys do.
And then it has that shade of darkness with the I got skeletons in my closet.
Right. And that's
so
a big
right
part
next
of his
to
deal.
Balenciaga, where it's like, how did you come to this? Is it blood diamonds? Don't lie to me, man.
Don't lie to me, man. We could talk about that guy. Are we in trouble? Is our show going to get taken out?
No, we just made the reference. Keep going.
Okay. We're not in that much trouble then. Okay. And then I've talked about Roc Marciano as just, he's a rapper's rapper, man, because he's bragging. But he's got a little pain inside, and he lets you peek in on that every now and then. But overall, he's bragging. He's cracking jokes. He's coming up with new ways to say, I'm just the best, and I'm almost tired of being the best, but I'm here again telling you I'm the best. I'm telling you that I'll shoot you in a metaphorical manner. I'm telling you how nice my car is. I'm telling you how great my women are. I'm telling you, you're just so in over your head dealing with me. If you're going to try to beat me as a rapper, like, I got you beat so many other ways. Like, there's no way. Like, just don't. And he always finds a different way to do it. Like, talking about medicine cabinets, and if I shoot you, the medicine cabinet isn't going to help you, or hey, the seats in my car are the skin color of some person that's well known. So when you think about the person, then now you know the color of the skin of the car. And
that's my Detroit leather.
Like these types of things. And it's like, man, in the way he delivers it, it sounds easy after you hear him do it. But if you just got handed this beat, it's like you talk about, this is a weird beat on this song. This is really odd. How do you know how to rap on this? And it's 3 different guys, and they don't all rap on it the same way, and they all kill it. Even the guy that we're saying is what are we going to call him? The least tricky rapper of the main big 3 of the Griseldas. And shoot, if you extend it beyond to the newer guys, people would say that, the newer guys that are on more songs with him now, Stove God and, the whole crew, like, people would say those guys are better too, but he's good enough. He's curating these songs. He's the one that's getting these producers. Like you said, he's a hell of an executive producer. And this is just another case of him having sense enough to get these people on a record together. That's another issue too, man. Like, you think about, as these guys start becoming bigger acts, I don't know what that text is like. Like, how do you, do you do it through The Alchemist? Because Alchemist is a tie-in, and he's worked with all 3 of these guys. He's got albums with all 3 of these guys now. Like, is that how you do it? I don't know. But they pulled it off, and they all got it. They got it together enough to get this song together. So, Really good times. It's like a little Super Friends, or I don't know what you want to call it, a cross promotional event where you get two people from different shows on the same episode or something. Like it's like having Uncle Phil and whatever other TV dad we could talk about without getting in trouble now. Like get them all in the same place.
So okay, we have Freddie Gibbs, and he's from LA.
He's in LA, but he's from Gary. He's from Gary,
That's
Indiana.
right. You said that, Gary, Indiana. So we have Freddie Gibbs. We have Westside Gunn from Buffalo, and Roc Marciano. I think he's from Long Island, but another New York guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Martin Scorsese, director, he directed a movie in 2011. It's based off this book called Hugo, The Invention of Hugo Cabaret. It's like for like young kids. Maybe like that's 12, 13 years old. The plot is great. The story, very, very good. He made the movie and won an Academy Award for Best Cinematography, Best Visual Effects, Academy Award for Best Production Design, and Academy Award for Best Sound Mixing. I believe there was a fifth award as well. And I saw the movie. I think the movie's great. The movie's great. But come on, guys, let's get serious. When we watch a Martin Scorsese movie, we want to see street stuff. We want to see some street tales. And that's what we're getting here, where it's like, okay, I'm listening to some heavy metal and they could talk about rainbows in it. Sure. Like I can listen to heavy metal. They could talk about rainbows and rabbits and bunnies, but they might want to just give me some heavy metal imagery. So sometimes when they do that, will there be some maybe some satanic stuff in there? Will it be some like industrial revolution kind of things like that? Yeah, like working class stuff. I got to kind of mess with that kind of imagery to do this. So these rappers, they're choosing to do these street tales because it's like, hey, they could do rhyme schemes about, going to work. They could do that. They can make that work. They can do rhyme schemes about like throwing a party. But they're just choosing as their imagery, hey, we're going to tell these street tales because I could do so many metaphors and wordplay and double entendres with cocaine talk, right? Because that cocaine, we can say that, but it'll mean like 10 different things.
Right.
So we're going to play around with that. There's so many ways that I can bend and talk about a Maybach and all that stuff. And that's what's going on here. I don't know if we can continue to talk about Roc Marciano, where there's a lot of things with Roc Marciano where I can just put the headphones and just vibe with it and just flow with it. But usually with Roc Marciano, especially if you really want to appreciate him, you have to sit down. You have to put those headphones on. And you got to really pay attention to what he's playing around with, where he's taking his pauses for emphasis, because he understands the attention to detail of not saying something at the moment. And then like when he's doing the braggadocious stuff, you have to pay attention to when he's saying, hey man, doing these things, they're good at the time, but even I know that's taking a price on my soul. So you got to get all that, because if you just let the stuff wash over you, you're kind of just like, this is just another one of those. But when you really see what these guys are playing around with, and guys, look, here's the deal. In this situation, the Alchemist beat, it's so intoxicating. I do have to make myself listen to what they're saying, because the beat is just, it's amazing. It's out of this world. So you would have to listen to this like 10 times to appreciate every little bit of what's going on.
Right, for sure. And they're counting on you coming back too, right? So that's why they don't mind getting dense with it, because yes, you hear the complaints that the topic is very surface level, but again, it's the way the words are put together. It's the way the little jokes are thrown in. And Roc Marciano will do this thing, and I don't know if he did it full strength on this specific verse, but he does it all the time. He'll tell a joke like at the first part of the verse, and then that joke will come back around and matter again like 35 seconds later in the same verse. And like you might not notice that until you're listening to the song for like the 15th time. And then you're like, oh, so yeah, okay. he's really good at this. And this is the level, and he's disarming you with the delivery. He's disarming you with the approach. He's disarming you with the subject matter because, again, like you say, you know what you're going to get when you go into these people's work. But even with you being disarmed and thinking that you know what you're going to get, they can still catch you off guard. Like they can still come up with something that you might not immediately get. And, uncovering those Easter eggs and finding those little gifts, I think is, I think if you know enough about me and what I like about music, and it's not the only thing I like, but I know I really like it when people are good enough to do that.
Arthur, something that Roc Marciano said on this record, yellow Bugatti looked like Bumblebee, compressor on the front to muffle the heat. The submachine gun, it come with the beam amongst other things that's unseen. To run with me, you need sunscreen cream. See, I'm covered in bling, bling.
Ain't no shade even under the trees where monkeys swing.
I love it.
Like you never know what's coming next because he's got the, we talk about it a lot with he's really like an MF Doom disciple in a very kind of clear way, right? Like it's obvious that he's got that fanhood inside of him because it's jumping topics and you never know when things are going to come back up. And again, it's the jokes, it's the delivery, even with Roc Marciano, you got to be paying attention to like the ad libs in the background because he'll say weird and funny stuff back there to go with it too. And you're just like, okay, this guy's having a good time with this approach to the music. And obviously it worked for him.
Yeah, and Roc Marciano, like, hey, because really, like, Westside Gunn talked about this as far as what Westside Gunn and the Griselda Move, what they're doing. Roc Marciano was doing this in his own space before them because, hey, like I told you, I saw like in the late 90s on the Smoking Grooves tour, Roc Marciano performing with Flipmode Squad.
Right.
So it's one of those things where like, hey, it's this big crew. Roc Marciano, maybe there's like, hey, what we're doing, like maybe it's not working for you. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to go my own way. And just imagine, he's made a career 20 plus years where if I go to the local drugstore and I'm waiting in line, I turn around and just ask somebody like, hey, do you know Roc Marciano? Maybe not, but he has such a big following and he played by his own rules career wise. And also like in his rhymes and stuff where it's like, he's going to make you come to him. He's not trying to like, hey, I'm jumping around, flipping around for you to come see me. You have to go to him and then you have to get in his mode because he's playing by his own rules.
Right.
And really like all three of them, they're all doing that.
Right. But like we talk about, like once they get you, they service you with the product, right? So we talk about volume of work, right? And in the rap universe, it got to the point where guys were, taking 3 and 4 years sometimes to come out with an album, if not longer than that. Like people would just kind of disappear and come back. And some of these guys have done that. But even if you just kind of start the clock at the time where they came back as who they kind of are now, I mean, Freddie Gibbs starting in 2013, he's got 10 albums and 10 mixtapes. Roc Marciano, he showed up with Marsburg in 2010. He's thought of as kind of like a recluse. He's got 12 albums. 12! And then Westside Gunn, you can forget about it. He's got over 20. And a lot of his stuff is, like we were talking about before we started, a lot of his stuff is mixtapes. They're called mixtapes, but when you listen to them, it's obvious that they're albums because they're skits. They're curated. It's not just, hey, I randomly made these songs and now I'm just going to slap them together. It's like, no, he had a plan. He had a whole series of tapes that just had the 12th rendition of it come out. the Hermes series. It's like this guy, again, crazy like a fox, man, trying to make it seem like I'm just over here just don't worry about me. And it's like, no, you're curating. You're doing things on purpose. And you're not as sneaky as you think you are. It's obvious that there's some skill going in this. There's some thought going into this. So that's a lot of music, man. That's 50 something albums between 3 artists. Plus their guest appearances. So that's like a crazy amount of music for 15 years, just from 3 artists. So even if these were the only 3 guys you liked, they'd give you almost more stuff than you could listen to quickly.
And these albums, they don't sound like demos. These sound like well-produced, well thought out, finished product records.
Right, and they have it all kind of lined up in their lane. And again, they got what are now these are not joking producers. You get Alchemist to return your call and make you a beat. That's a kind of big deal.
Oh yeah.
And now we got Conductor is getting his turn. Conductor Williams. There's some guys in the quote unquote background making all these beats, making this stuff go. And there's a bunch of other people bubbling up trying to do the same thing. And so these guys, it's not the same thing as having Dr. Dre come in and fix your drums, right? But it's a lot of stuff going on. And these guys have ended up kind of popping up in some weird places, right? Like around some of these superstar big stuff people. So it's like, you kind of wonder like how underground are these guys? Or maybe it's just a part of the story that they're telling you. And it's like, hey, we can't totally ruin the illusion, almost like the wrestling that they're talking about, right? Like we're selling you on a story. If it becomes obvious that we're helping Kanye write half his stuff, it probably is going to kind of ruin that mystique. But what do you know? All these guys have been kind of around, maybe not Roc Marciano, but like Gibbs and Conway and them, like the photos are there. The song appearances are there. So like, those guys are around. So they've pulled off something really cool. And, I picked this song not even so much as from a ranking standpoint of thinking, oh, this is the best song I've ever heard from these 3 guys. But having those 3 guys together gave us an excuse to talk about all 3 of them, right?
Yeah. Now, I said Roc Marciano's from Long Island. It says here from New York. So usually if it just says New York, then it's the island of Manhattan.
Yeah, because what?
Yeah, I guess.
He talks about Hempstead a lot too, right?
Ah, okay. Roc Marciano. Guys, you got Freddie Gibbs, Westside Gunn, 500 ounces off the 2020 release, Pray for Paris.
Pray for Paris.
Wow. So yeah, you put your final thoughts on this. 500 ounces. It's a jam. It is definitely a good record. Produced by Alchemist. Alchemist is from Massachusetts or Los Angeles?
But I know it's never really... no. Born in Beverly Hills, California.
Ah, okay.
But
yeah,
why
did I throw Massachusetts
on him? At? I don't know where he grew up at, though.
Yeah. Why did I throw that on him? All right, so... Yeah, man. Beverly Hills, California. Shady Records, Death Row Records, Empire, Rockefeller Records. I mean, this guy has a track record. The young people know about Alchemist and his shenanigans as far as making my life happy with his productions. And that's the short and long of it.
Doing it. Yeah, when you hear he's doing a record, you're like, okay, that's one record I know I'm going to like for sure.
Yeah.
But, again, even when I try not to do that, usually I want to do it in the positive, right? To say, oh, such and such is involved. Okay, he's going to make sure this is good. So he's got that level of credibility with me at this point and has had it for a while. But again, he earned a lot of stripes with me way back, 2007 with Return of the Mac. So And again, I always listen to that album. I always tell people I felt like I was in on a secret. Like I felt like I was the only, like some kind of way I was the only person that had that album. And then I showed up somewhere like a few years later, and I think I brought it up to you and Kevin. And y'all were both like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, all right. Okay. I'm glad somebody else heard this because this was awesome.
Like we told you, hey, it's okay. It's okay.
Yes, it was okay and still is. I dare you listen to Return to Mac now. Woo, still a good time.
So guys, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to take a short break so you guys can hear about this J.S. April. When we come back, we'll talk about what I'm putting on the record on the Record Jams, episode 11.
Back in 1940, 8 sensational heroes united to create the world's very first superhero team, the Justice Society of America. Now, 85 years later, we're gathering podcasters and bloggers from around the globe for a month-long celebration in an event we're calling J.S. April. Throughout April 2025, join dozens and dozens of podcasters and bloggers as they each share their own unique tributes to the original and greatest superhero team. Get ready for an all-star month of beloved characters, fascinating insights, and incredible stories. Follow the action on social media with the hashtag JSApril and visit our website for a complete list of participating podcasters, bloggers, and what they're each covering at fireandwaterpodcast.com/JSApril.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to On the Record Jams, episode 11, brought to you by the Right On Network. Arthur and AJ are here with you, and I'm going to talk about what I'm putting on the record for this episode. And that is Evil by Interpol. So Interpol, they're a band from New York City. And they came out. New York City. We've been in New York a lot. Like past like episode 5 or whatever. I'm going to have to venture out. Yeah, New York City. Yeah, it's fine. Get a rope. So we're talking about Interpol, comprised of they came out during that whole 2001 Y2K, a number of New York bands, The Strokes, the Yeah Yeahs, which they have a song called Maps from back then, and now it's very popular with kids and stuff because of something going on TikTok. And Interpol. So Evil is off their sophomore album, and this album, it was a victim of the Napster, it being because remember back then, like it would be October and they're telling you like, hey, we got an album and it's completed, it'll be out in April. Well, we don't do that anymore, right?
No.
Like folks would be done with something and they're uploading it that night. It's not, well, we got to wait 6 months because we want to put it out in this fiscal quarter, or we're going to promote it with these magazines and all that. So it's not one of those things.
Yep, so, no rollouts anymore. The rollout, most albums, they roll it out when they tell you it's out. And then they do the rollout after the album is out. Like the album's out, you go listen to it when you get a chance, and then we'll come back and convince you to listen to it again. Or if you haven't listened to it yet, we'll convince you to go ahead and hit play on it.
So Interpol, it came out, they first came out in that, 2001 time. There is a documentary called Meet Me in the Bathroom, named after a Strokes song off their second album, Room on Fire. And it's about like this early New York scene in the early 2000s, rock scene. And in that footage, in that documentary, there's footage of Paul Banks, lead singer of Interpol, where he's like in the rubble, like picking up paper and stuff. And I'm like, that's kind of crazy they even have that footage. Because I'm always about like, hey man, always be grateful whenever you have kind of anything. So with the Beatles, they have that Get Back thing that Peter Jackson cleaned up. The fact that we even have that, like it's the Beatles making an album. Can you believe that? Like, I may have said this on this podcast, but like when my mom was growing up, their house burned down. So there may be only like like 8 pictures of her family total. Like my dad, he doesn't really have, like, he has like 2 pictures of his mom. That's it. Like he doesn't have like really pictures of his family. So the fact that like they, and then, with in the 90s where RZA had the flood in his basement, and who knows what those albums would have been. Right, Arthur?
Right. How crazy they would have been. And yeah, just the concept of documentation, right? Like self-documentation. And now you have an environment where you could pull up, like a teenager's phone, and they may have like 700 pictures of themselves. And not even like an outgoing, selfish, absorbed type person, but like they got screen captures. They got pictures of themselves like trying on stuff and saying, how does that look? And sending it to their friends. And like, because the price of taking a picture is basically down to nothing now, because you're not talking about developing film. You're not talking about a high wall to entry as far as having the technology. In general, if you have a cell phone, you got a pretty decent camera sitting right in your pocket. So like, it's crazy how they kind of have a handle on it, and their documentation is more like there's a bunch of junk. Whereas you talk about like your parents, like as crazy as those situations are, like much older, much more of an experience, but far less documentation.
So, and this was during a time where the documentation is not digitized. So even if there's a flood, well, we can get it out the web or whatever, the cloud. So Interpol, Evil is the second single off their sophomore album, which was leaked. And Interpol is a band where I did not know much about them. I got into them like kind of after the fact. By the time their third album came out, I think there were a couple of times where I tried to listen to the music and I didn't get what was going on. And the only reason why I didn't get it is because I was in another mode of music. I was listening to more kind of like indie rock and like power pop type rock, that whatever Interpol was doing, it was like, what is this? I don't know what they're doing. And now, even now, like if I had to write down my top 25 bands, musical acts, maybe Interpol wouldn't crack it. Having said that, for the past 10 years, I listen to them every day. So this is Evil. The second album suffered from the Napster, people downloading it and all this stuff.
But that would have been post-Napster, right? That would have been just the era of like everybody's got people are starting to have high-speed internet connections. And it was post-Napster, but still in that era where everything's leaking. Yes. Right? Everybody's album is leaking. And the record labels can't figure it out because they still have this old approach of what you described. Like, turn your album in on January 12th, and then we'll try to get it out by the summertime. And yeah, in that 6 months, all sorts of leakage and stuff going. Whenever you turn it in to have the CDs pressed, or whatever you call CD creation, as soon as you turn that in, it's a wrap, right? Because now you're producing multiple copies of it. Somebody from that plant steals it, it's over for you, right? Like it's out there. It's on the internet somewhere because somebody's taken $5,000 to upload your album or whatever the market was for a stolen album, right? But yeah, it's crazy. Maybe we call it all into that Napster thing, but I did want to kind of dig into that. I was trying to remember. Like,
you're right about that.
Napster
it is post Napster.
Yeah, Napster was like late 90s, mid 90s, but
early 2000s.
But yeah. But when you get into this era, like 04, 05, you still got leaking going on like crazy.
This one was produced by Peter Cadis, who I'm not really familiar with as far as like other work that this person has done. I need to look that up. It was released January 3rd, 2005. I talked about like how, so Paul Banks is the singer guitar player. Carlos D, who's not with the band anymore. He was on the first 4 albums. He's a bass player. Wonderful opening bass line on this record. Sam Figueroa, awesome drummer. I believe he did drums with Marilyn Manson and other folks before he entered this band. And then the founder of the group, Daniel Kessler, and I believe they all met in New York City at NYU. And they said, like, hey, we call ourselves Interpol because it's different. Like with the Strokes, they grew up together, like in high school. Like same thing, like the Beatles, whatever. Like, hey, we knew each other when we were kids and then we became a band. Where these guys were kind of comprised from different parts of the globe. Not the different parts of the globe, but like just from their four corners of their world. Just like Interpol. Whereas like, hey, man, this criminal did some wild stuff in France and now they're in Germany. It's out of our jurisdiction. Who could pick this up? Interpol. And, I was talking to Arthur about how like Paul Banks, who's done some albums in Spanish, and he did a full-blown album with the RZA of the Wu-Tang Clan. Isn't that crazy, Arthur?
That is crazy. And you think that's been a long time since that happened. And yeah, it's cool that they were able as a group to take breaks and do their own solo stuff and venture out and then come back together and actually make more music, right? Because sometimes once those groups start breaking off and doing their own thing, if one person has a hit too big, you can forget about it, right? Like it's gonna be like 10 or 15 years before people come back together and get some music together. But they've been able to take their breaks a little bit more in a planned manner, and when they start working on their stuff, they sit down, they figure it out, and they get some music out. So kudos for them for being able to figure that out, because you can imagine as a group that can get crazy real fast.
I believe Paul Banks, he said that RZA heard their song. I love the song. It's off their third album called The Scale. And the production on it, the tempo, the pace, I could see how RZA would like that. And they got together, made an album. I know Ghostface is on one of the tracks. Maybe some other Wu-Tang Clan members as well.
Yeah, they had the Woo-was on there. The Woo was supporting it. they on a few songs, yeah.
Surprisingly enough, I never bought the album. I never really sat down and listened to it. I'm going to have to check that out. So when Interpol first came out, it was one of those things where, I don't know, like they're getting praise, but they're also getting like an early backlash. I remember just seeing them in magazines because I would get Rolling Stone and Spin magazine. I would always see them in magazines, but never was intrigued to listen to the music. And it was like one of those situations where I know like Spin magazine, like they would kind of do like these comic strips in the back, and they had Interpol on there, and they kind of made it seem like they were like these pompous, pretentious, Ivy Leaguers or whatever. So I was like, what's up with that? And then at some point I finally started listening to it and then getting it. I think it was mostly with the third album, because the third album is, some might say it's a little overproduced, but I think it's like, all right, we figure out what we are, and we are a full-blown band, and this is our career, and we get how to do this. So we're doing like what the first and second album did, but we're just being way more polished about it and being way more score thematic, over the top with it, and I love it. And then that's when I went back to the first and second albums and went, oh yeah, okay, this is really good stuff. I know like they are being compared to like bands from the 70s and 80s out of New York, like I think New Order and bands like that. Joy Division, because of the singer Paul Banks, how his vocal delivery. So they just went like, oh, they sound like Joy Division. So that would be like some lazy journalist stuff to do some shorthand stuff. Because, when like hot things come out, you want to compare it to something real quick. I mean, I'm even doing it. So right. That was kind of the vibe, the thing going on there. So I'm going to read these lyrics by Paul Banks. And I've listened to this song for over like 15 years. And then when we were doing the research for this, I was like, oh, Arthur, they said that this song is based off like this couple in England that murdered some people. I was like, oh.
And some people really dispute that wholeheartedly. Like, that's not what this song is about. But yeah, apparently Interpol won't confirm or deny.
And I would there's this book called The Giver by Lois Lowry, and there's certain things that go on at the end of that book. And when I read that, I think about this music. And yeah, and then I don't know if you saw the video with the puppet and the ambulance and all that.
Yeah, Norman. I'm up on Norman.
Okay, so here it is. It's Rosemary. Heaven restores you in life. You're coming with me through the aging, the fearing, the strife. It's the smiling on the package. It's the faces in the sand. It's the thought that moves you upwards, embracing you with two hands. Right will take you places. Yeah, maybe to the beach. When your friends, they do come crying. Tell them now your pleasure set upon slow release. Hey, wait, great smile, sensitive to fate, not denial. But hey, who's on trial? It took a lifespan with no cellmate, the long way back. Sandy, why can't we look the other way? We speak about travel, yeah, we think about the land. We smart like all peoples, feeling real tan. I can take you places. Do you need a new man? Wipe the pollen from the faces, make revision to a dream while you wait in the van. Hey, wait, great smile, sensitive to fate, not denial. But hey, who's on trial? It took a lifespan with no cellmate. By the long way back, Sandy, why can't we look the other way? You're weightless, you're exotic. You need something for which to care. Sandy, why can't we look the other way? Leave some shards under the belly, lay some grease inside the hand. It's a sentimental jury and the making of a good plan. You've come to love me lightly. Yeah, you come to hold me tight. Is this motion everlasting, or do shudders pass in the night? Rosemary, oh, heaven restores you in life. I spent the lifespan with no cellmate, the long way back. Sandy, why can't we look the other way? You're weightless, semi-erotic. You need someone to take you there. Sandy, why can't we look the other way? Why can't we just play the other game? Why can't we just look the other way? Now, I'm not saying one of the reasons why I picked this record, I knew I wanted to do an Interpol record at some point. And I think I wanted to start off with The Scale. But then I picked this one just in case, like, there's a bunch of people who are like, hey, I never really listened to Interpol. I think this is one of the records that it has all the little things that they do. And to fit with the theme, Interpol came out, like, you know, they started the band like in 1998. I believe their first album was released in 2000. And they're still a band now. They release music now. And I'm not saying that they're just doing the same thing over and over, but it's a brand you can trust. They're not going to go in some direction where like, whoa, what are you doing? They're pretty much giving you the same thing. I mean, not the same thing over and over, but they have a chamber and they augment it. They stretch it out. They contort it. They do whatever they can. They go sideways. They go forward and backward in time. But it's Interpol. Interpol's Interpol. And one of the reasons why I like this record is I like, you know, like in hip hop, you and I, like, we like when the beat changes. We like when it stops on a dime and turns this way. And I feel like there's so many, these guys are like technicians. You know, they're mechanics. And it's definitely a flat team structure on here where the egos are at the door, because it's not like, hey, I'm the major songwriter and these other guys are accompanying me. They all get the same writing credit, and it's all like, we all get a say. And they talked about how if we don't all agree on it, we don't do it. And when Carlos D, when he left the group, do they have a bass player where they're on the road? Yes. But when they're in studio, it's the three of them. So, yeah, Interpol. Arthur, what did you think about this one?
Well, it's always crazy to think, like, you try to, at least in my case, I'm of the age now where I can try to put myself back in certain times. When I see a time frame, I'll say, okay, 2004, okay, 2005. What was I doing? Where was I living at? Okay. What was I caught up in? What was I worried about? What was I listening to? And then you try to lay these records that we put on the record into those and say, okay, what was the context? And like you talk about, like, I was in a complete other chamber. So like, I wouldn't have caught this on purpose, and maybe I stumbled across it. Like, I vaguely remember the video. And so this is where I get to go on kind of my tangent about tour guides, right? Like musical tour guides, having people to kind of put you on this stuff and come get you, because I think that's probably the shame of where we're at now, right? We have algorithms telling us we think you're going to like this because you like something else that's kind of like this other thing. And you can kind of get in a rut really bad. Whereas if you take advantage of your friends, right, and the people around you, or even if you're going to have some kind of online community of people that listen to different stuff, you can kind of get those musical tour guides. You can get those show tour guides. Like, I've tried to be a tour guide to you almost in thanks for how many different things you've put me on to. Like, you remember coming to my, at the time, apartment and like showing me the first and the Batman trilogy, or and like, hey man, check this out. You bringing The Wire over to my house and saying, dude, you need to watch this. I know some people aren't watching this. I'm guessing you're not watching it because we're not talking about it. I need to bring this to you where you can watch it. And we
gotta give props to Kevin, because Kevin brought The Wire to me.
Yes, man. And it's like those moments and things have so much value, right? When you're willing to, trust somebody with your time like that, and, kind of fall out of your own concept or expertise, right? Of how great you think you are and how wide you think a net that you think you're casting. And you could just, like, you need these, like, I think our show is really good for that too, right? Because it's like, hey, you could be missing some stuff just because you have how many ever thousands of songs in your playlist or whatever. There's a bunch of music that's come out over our lifetime, and we've been really fortunate to experience a lot of different changes in the music world where people can get music out. And it's just a matter of when do you find it? How do you find it? What do you do with it once you find it? And so it's like when I was sitting here listening to Interpol over the last week to study for this, I'm like, okay, man, like, I remember the group name. And like I said, I kind of remember this video because it was a real odd video. But it's like, I didn't listen to Interpol albums. I completely missed this. And these guys have a whole ongoing history. And I'm like, yeah, this is something that I can climb into and get to. Because I'm one of these people that's like, I never feel like, oh man, I'm out of stuff. Like, I don't have anything to listen to. I'm more like, I got a bunch of stuff to listen to, and it's just a matter of when I get to it. And I need to come, I'll use this as an excuse to kind of come out of my algorithm and get into something else. So I was able to do that with this. And yeah, man, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the research. I enjoyed checking into this group and, seeing what they had done. And again, I really liked the idea that they were able to put out a lot of music, do their thing. If it's not working out, somebody leaves. If they need a break, they take a break. And then they've been able to, almost all of them come back together and make more music. Because how many different stories that we have with, really good groups that couldn't figure it out. So, I thought about all of that stuff in context of just having this one song brought to my attention.
This group, the music is very moody. It seemed like something that needs to be played at night, that they should be playing inside. They do festivals where it's outside. I'm pretty sure it works. I saw them in Houston where it was outside. It was at nighttime. And this song, it's rocking and it's rolling and it's moody as well. It's dark. Usually when they perform, they're usually in all black. So it's that kind of thing where it was Y2K's, like, we're doing Nirvana, we're doing Radiohead, we're doing The Cure, and we're going to bunch all that up and we're going to present like the Y2K version of that to do another oversimplification of them.
Yeah. So that's another thing, right? I wanted to ask you, like, that happens, right? When these groups come in and they're like a renaissance of something else, like where we just talked about with Westside Gunn and Freddie Gibbs and Roc Marciano, them doing like a Super Friends thing was like by choice, and it was fun, and then they all kind of scattered off and did their own things. and in some cases with the exact same producers, but completely different albums and songs. And they were allowed. I think the great thing about those guys is we couldn't even think of what to call what they do because they haven't been subheadered, right? They haven't had a tag thrown on them to say this is you and this is all you can do. The thing I wanted to ask you about Interpol is, like, did they survive that fate too, or did they get lumped in with the other groups that came out around that time, or were they allowed to be their own thing?
Both. So, yeah, they were definitely lumped into hey, this is one of those early 2000 New York bands. Like, they're going to always have that on them. And one of the reasons why they were able to survive is because at that time, there were a lot of bands that came out. Because we'll talk about this again when I bring up some other folks from this time. So it's the late 90s, early 2000s, and you have Britney Spears, you have Korn and Fred Durst. Remember that?
Yeah.
Limp Bizkit. You got Limp Bizkit, you got Korn, you got Britney Spears. So you have that kind of stuff going on. And there was a group out of El Paso at the drive-in where they try to go, okay, so this is going to be Rock Saviors. All right. And they were on Diamond. It was a record label that the Beastie Boys put out. And like everyone put all of their energy into this band at the drive-in from El Paso, Texas. And then boom, right when they were about to blow up, they quit, went their own way.
Boom. So
it's like these magazines were really trying to look for, like, you know, again, like, we really don't like this Limp Bizkit stuff. We don't really like this, but what we're going to do? And then boom, you kind of get this New York rock explosion. But it really kind of, and in the documentary, Meet Me in the Bathroom, it's about the New York rock scene from like late 90s to 2001. But really, man, rock and roll is dead. So the fact that some of these bands are still going, it's because they just kind of stay true to themselves. They didn't go on the MTV Music Awards and try to do these things. They're like, hey, like, if this isn't in our comfort zone, we're just not going to do it. And just like Westside Gunn, MF Doom, it's like, oh, I feel like I could trust these people. Somebody's going to keep riding with them. And that's the same thing that this group did. And some other groups, where there's some groups that came out during that time and we don't hear from them anymore. And then you got folks like Interpol, where it's like, hey, we go off and do our own thing. But now it's like, if it's now when you're a brand, when you got that cult following where it's like, man, we can go around the world and sell out places. It's just like with Redman and Method Man, where Redman was like, man, we thank you young artists that don't know how to put on a show because they keep paying us. And that's what's happening. Now we're in 2025. I believe Interpol's last album was in 2023. So yeah, there we have it. And there's one song that Interpol has, Cruising in My Blue Machine. I will put a link to that because I made this video to the music. So a link for that will be on this episode in the show notes. Cruising in My Blue Machine.
Very
nice.
It's
a Interpol Doctor Who mashup.
Yeah, that was good stuff right there that you put together. I got a chance to check that out too. But yeah, man, I always, I appreciate you being a tour guide, man. You've taken me on some very nice tours that I wouldn't have been able to, maybe I wouldn't have never made it to. Cause like you say, you get off in your own place, looking at your own stuff, and, you can miss out on a lot of really good stuff sometimes if you get too isolated. And I know for sure, over the last, 20, 25 years, I've had different times where I've been isolated for this, that, or the reason, caught up in work or caught up trying to get some stuff accomplished or, working on myself or what have you.
Being a family man.
Yeah, all of that, trying to work on that and do a good job of that too. And yeah, you can kind of get in a rut. You can kind of let your music lamp kind of start flickering on you, and then you start listening to the same stuff over and over again, which can be fun. But, you know, venturing out and having some other stuff, and it can get really, you can really discover that there's this whole world of music out there for you. So I hope that our show is helping people do that, and we can give them some stuff to sink their teeth into.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around every once in a while, you can miss it.
Yep.
That's Ferris Bueller. So, yeah, hey, guys, let us know what you think. We did Westside Gunn's 500 Ounces featuring Roc Marciano and Freddie Gibbs. And then we went over to talk about Interpol's Evil. Let us know what you think about that. There's a lot of live performances where Interpol did television appearances, like Greg Ferguson, the whole nine, Craig Ferguson. And I'm surprised that Interpol, they've never played Saturday Night Live. I don't know what that is about, but they've never done an SNL performance.
Huh.
So it's been 50 years, SNL. They're from New York. Just do it.
Yeah, it seems like they ought to work that in there somewhere.
I'm thinking they must have turned it down. Who knows?
Probably so, right?
Yeah. Because they've done a lot of TV performances. Like, they've gone on David Letterman a number of times. And they've gone on TV to do live performances. I don't know why they wouldn't go on Saturday Night Live. But yeah,
hey, what is it? Certain details, maybe of how you have to prepare for that. Maybe it doesn't jive with how they work. We're making up stuff, not knowing anything, right? Like maybe they just said no because they don't watch the show or whatever.
Maybe they said no, but I'm thinking they may have not been asked. But then they may not have been asked. I don't know. Well, and if you guys know that answer, like, wait a minute, why hasn't Interpol been on SNL? And it's not one of those situations where, like, oh, every time when they release stuff, SNL's in the off season. No, I don't think that's the case either. But where can the folks reach us, Arthur, so they can add their comments about these records?
We got OTJR at Bluesky. We got On the Record Jams on X, if you're still doing that. We have On the Record Jams on Facebook. Don't want to leave out everybody. You know, we have some older listeners that may want to jump on there and do their thing in between liking pictures of people's birthdays and stuff. So we got that. We got On the Record Jams at gmail.com for people that want to send the emails. We appreciate the ones we've gotten. And I eventually figured out how to make sure I was updated every time I got a new email there. So now I think we're good for that. You should get a quicker reply if you send something our way there. And I think that's it for now.
Yeah. So patreon.com/RightOnNetwork. On the Record Jams, we truly appreciate it. So keep jamming, right, Arthur?
Please keep jamming. My goodness, yes.
And keep your lamplight trimmed and burning.